This is Reality Dispatch, written by Jim Minns.
"3 years from now, she would admit it to herself and would have taken steps to have it addressed. Her children would notice the improvement in her demeanor and temperament. She would have grasped concepts and theories on relationships and human interaction that would have perplexed her at any other stage in life. Her emotional maturity would advance beyond expectations, and strangers would reach out to her for assistance. Her resurrection would be complete, and happiness would no longer be an elusive concept. But not today. Today, she would drink the wine from a coffee cup, hidden from view, and from the shame her ego would push her towards if the liquid were housed in a regular wine glass. The taste no longer gave her throat that warm comfort it used to, that feeling she had chased every day since the first time it was felt. The kids were at school, and she longed for their lunch breaks, when she would hear the school bell radiate through her bedroom window, allowing her to pop the cork and fill her glass. Lately, the hour had grown earlier and earlier. She hadn't bothered to check her watch anymore since that morning she noticed the short hand barely reach above the number 9. Since the gulp hadn't warmed her throat, the psychology of addiction compelled her to chase it with another and another. Never quite getting that satisfaction she once yearned for. Her abilities slowly faded as the sun swayed across the afternoon sky. The bell that marked the end of the day was on the precipice of ringing, and she had not completed any of her chores. She grabbed a handful of wet clothes from the washing machine and ran out the back door, barely noticing the piles that had dropped in her wake along the garden path. Roderick's pants from the academy were among them. She turned back and knelt beside the fabric. She slumped to the floor and curled into the fetal position. She held the wet pants close to her chest. She cleaned an item of his once a week. You never know when he might want them, she'd tell herself. He'd been killed during a roadside breath test that he was administering on a busy highway in the rain with reports of fog. All that could go wrong did go wrong. Here she was, maintaining his legacy, taken from her at the behest of a drunk driver who didn't care for her or her family and their needs that relied on this man. She was herself, now drinking to keep her wicked reality at bay. She felt her chest go cold as the dampness seeped into her own clothes. She tilted her head up and saw a spider standing in the middle of its web, its heavy sack turned against her. It stood on its creation, motionless, carefree, the way she wished she was. She raised her hand and pointed a finger towards its enormous abdomen. Her finger went right through it like it was cutting through water. There was the slightest tingle, but otherwise the mass was intact. The spider barely registered the interruption of its physiology. She pulled back her finger in fright. She looked it over. No stains, no blood, no mucus. She was beginning to sober. She stood up and looked down at the arachnid as it swayed in the breeze her movement had created. It was motionless. She looked over her finger once more and looked ahead. The outside wall was littered with webs that had not been swept away since Roderick's death. She pointed her finger right in the middle between them and watched as it disappeared into the wall. She imagined her hand being caught between two locations and instantly felt the sensation of the wall caving in, surrounding her flesh and pinching the insides. The point of her index finger was exposed to the room on the other side, the end of the finger continuing to be attached to her hand. But the girth of the finger itself, it was indeterminate. It was in the wall, but it also was the wall. The doorbell rang, and she found herself stuck, unable to move the mass of the finger. She panicked. She attempted to pull her finger away from the wall, but there was no direct, circular exit point. Her persona was a part of the infrastructure of the house, and it would not budge no matter how hard it was tugged. "You need to put your mind into a place of hope or despair," came a voice. A yell. Someone outside, at a great distance. Perhaps out front of the house, on the street. "Concentrate." In a panic, she breathed slowly and put her mind where it was when her finger entered the particles. She thought of Roderick in his final moments. The fear and uncertainty his accident had left him. The shock and realization once it had occurred, and his gradual slipping from reality. She began to cry, feeling the tears as they strolled down her cheeks with her eyes squinted shut. She opened them slowly to see that her finger was no longer connected to the wall, but rested freely on her hand, still outstretched, but emancipated. The doorbell rang again, and she opened the back door to walk through the house. She glanced at the wall clock on her way, 5 minutes to 3. Almost time to pick up the kids. She felt drunk. She was in no state. She opened the entrance and was greeted by a man in a brown suit and fedora hat. He was elderly and excited. "Greetings," he declared. "I'm really not interested," she said, swinging the door shut. "Well, how do you know if you haven't heard me out yet?" he said. The door closed with a thud. "He hasn't really left you, you know. Roderick," the man said behind the wooden front door. She stopped in her tracks down the hallway. She turned back to look at his silhouette in the frosted glass. The man waited and watched as the door opened again with inquisition. "I can show you," he explained as it swung back open. "What the hell are you talking about?" she asked, her voice laced with aggression. "You just discovered it yourself. The particles. You can summon yourself down to them. Make yourself separate and one. There and not there," he said. She frowned, ready to slam the door once again. "Think about it," he said, removing his hat. "Remember when you were a child and you were being chased by Emily Rosen and the Peel Street girls? You would hide in the girls' bathroom, but that wasn't enough, was it? They'd always find you. Then one day, you decided you'd had enough of being discovered. You turned your fear into determination, and you were able to break yourself down particle by particle and seep through the walls. You reassembled on the other side," he said. Her memory jogged at the recollection in his voice. She had suppressed her skills. She was afraid of what she could accomplish. She remembered the feeling that power had caused her, the feeling of almost being lost in the void of atoms, where she was indistinguishable from the atoms of everything else around her. It frightened her more than the Peel Street girls. She never wanted that feeling of being lost amongst the elements again. She suppressed her skills. "How do you know this?" she asked. "Because that was the day you met me," he said. "I was in particle form when you ventured through the school walls and out to freedom. You reassembled, and I saw you at that moment. I reassembled in you, and you carried me through the rest of your schooling years. Then, when you met Roderick, I left. No good having 3 people in a marriage," he explained. "I don't understand," she said. "I don't believe you," she added, growing angry. "Don't lose it. Not yet," he said. "Let me show you rather than explain." He placed his hands by his sides and closed his eyes. His body dissolved into a heap of ash that blew in the wind and into oblivion. It gathered itself 3 meters away from the front door and reassembled. "I was once a man many, many years ago. Then I entered the particle realm. But now, for some reason, I am drawn to you. Maybe I'm your guardian angel," he said. She sat down on the floor in the frame of the doorway. "Just breathe," he said. She panted but managed to recompose herself. She was curious for answers despite her fear. "I know this," she said. "I mean, I don't, but somehow I always knew this. I always felt like something was there, like I could do something if I wanted to. If I really tried, I could do something not normal." The school bell echoed off the mountains and surrounded the porch. She looked off in its direction. "I've got to get the kids," she said, "but I'm in no state to drive." The man knelt down with her. "Let's get them together," he said. He picked up her hands and held one in each of his. He looked into her eyes, and she could feel his gaze penetrate her soul, deep inside, beyond her heart. "Close them," he said. She closed her eyes and held them tight. She allowed him to guide her into the particle realm. She felt her physical form go limp and dissolve altogether, and the fear of being absorbed into the mass of everything returned, a familiar fear not felt since childhood. She was here, and somewhere else. She was herself, and she was everything else. She felt the connection to her children, and she absorbed herself into their particles. Together, the 4 of them reverted back to the particles that represented their front door and reassembled on the doorstep. The children looked up at their mother, confused. She looked at the man, still holding her hands. "How?" she said. "Nothing ever dies. We simply return to our particle form. Nothing comes from nothing. There is always something left behind," he explained. A construct of particles formed the shape of a body behind him. She knew who it was as the form took shape. She felt it amongst her particles and surrounding the children. "Roderick," she said.
For more stories of fact-based fiction, head to jimmins.substack.com.